Uh, my name is Oliver, and I started the storyline through Margareta, where I wrote my paper on storyline and the story within a storyline. And I did it at Backatorpsskolan, and which eventually landed me a job there as well. And I'm a teacher now, and I teach years 4 to 6. I have been doing so for almost a year now. And yeah. And today I'll be talking about why we should use the story in storyline. I'll talk about fictional literacy, envisionment, and the literary worlds within, and then where I saw the story in a storyline that I observed at Backatorpsskolan. And I'll finish off with what to think about when you're doing a storyline and how to include the story and get the most out of it. And stories as a pedagogical tool, they can be used to enhance the abilities of the learner, and abilities such as critical and creative thinking, and it can be used to create emotions and visions for the learners. It can also be used to teach about norms, and not just about, but in norms and values. And you do this through keeping in mind the time, the place, the environment. Think of it as a story, as a book or a movie. So you keep the dramaturgical curve in mind and give the pupils time for reflection. And drama and role play are also a part of it, and they're also a great pedagogical tool. And they can create a deeper understanding, and it helps variate and motivate the lessons and motivate the pupils. And it creates a form of internalization for the pupils, so they feel that they own what they learn. And they get to practice social skills as well through all the interactive activities. And it's also a way to approach sensitive material, as they make their own characters and they don't have to stand for their own opinions. They can use it through the character. And you do this through costume, sound, the story. It creates a variation, the variation that they need. And the physical activities helps with the internalization of the stuff that they are learning. And the interactive activities, as I said, it helps promote the social skills of the learner. And the dramaturgy and the realism. And when I say realism, I don't mean that it needs to be fact. It needs to be related to the topic, what you want to learn, what you want them to learn. And story can be used, and in my view, should be used as the driving force of the storyline. And you do this through the theme or the topic. You do it through events, but also the characters, because the pupils themselves, they're creative, and you should use that. And fictional literacy. It's literacy, but within a fictional text, and instead of a factual text. And there's a wide definition of text, as storyline is a multimodal approach. So it can be applied to the entirety of a storyline. And the goal is to attain a high literacy, where the learners are able to move through the storyline, the text, and grasp pieces everywhere. And in fictional literacy, you talk about the empty spaces within a text. And those empty spaces could be where there's no background for a character, or there's no real environment in the text. And the learners fill the empty spaces with inferences, where they take what they know and they put that to use. They take everything they've previously known and create their own. They fill the empty spaces. And a large part of fictional literacy is envisioning literature. And it is what happens where the reader meets the text. It includes what's understood and what is not. And everything the learner brings with them to the text, it affects the envisionment. And it's open for change. So I'll go through the phases of it soon, but it's not static, it can change. And it develops over time. So the more time you spend in a storyline, the more the envisionment develops. And as it is fictional instead of factual, in a factual literacy, you're often looking for the answer. But with fictional text, you're looking for the horizon, the possibilities. And it also opens up the possibilities to discuss text and storylines and sensitive subjects, and gives the learners the opportunity to fill those empty spaces within the text together. For those, and which is a great help for those who can't do it on their own, hasn't attained that level of fictional literacy yet. And the 5 stages of envisioning literature is being outside and entering envisionment, being inside and moving through envisionment, exiting and taking what you know under reconsideration, exiting and objectifying the experience, exiting envisionment and moving on. And I'll talk more about those and say where I saw it in the storyline that I was observing soon. But I will explain what I've been watching first. And I went to Backatorpsskolan and I observed the sustainable marketplace. And these are the events that I saw when I observed it. So it started up with a letter from Sture at Parks and Recreation, where he wanted them to build a sustainable marketplace. After that, they constructed the market stands, and they made the characters, and then they had discussions about what they needed to make the marketplace sustainable. Then they received an application from a new stand who had maybe not the most environmentally friendly toys that they sold. And some of the pupils who wrote a reply letter, and the others went on with speed dating in English. And then they presented their market stands at the end of it all. And back to envisionment. Being outside and entering envisionment is about seeking. It's you see places, you see characters. You want to know, you want to get a wide understanding of what it's all about. And the learners start filling these empty spaces, because in the beginning there are a lot of empty spaces. And you could compare it to when you first pick up a book and you see the front cover. And that cover gives you an idea of what it's going to be about. And that's where it all starts. And in this case, the cover of the book was the letter from Sture, where he wanted them to build the marketplace. And sustainability was a hard topic to grasp from what I understood of the answers I got from the pupils. But it was eased in through the key question, what is a market sound? But when you're outside and entering envisionment, a deeper understanding is not what happens at first. That happens in being inside and moving through envisionment. And they question motives, emotions. They work through ideas, connect the dots. And a large part of the storyline takes place in this phase. And one example was the newsstand, where they were given the chance to argument the pros and cons of having the newsstand, how it would affect their market, what the ideas were. And a few comments about being inside and moving through envisionment that I got was that without the story, it's no storyline, just another project where you're not really working with anything. And without the story, it's hard to picture what's going to look like, and how it's going to be. It's easier if you get a background so you know what it's all about. And that could be an example of someone who has a hard time to fill those empty spaces. They need the entire picture. They need a background as well. And when they had the discussions about the newsstand, the fictional elements yet again gave them the freedom to speak without giving their own thoughts. They could use their characters' thoughts. Exiting and taking what you know under reconsideration. It looks a lot like your typical lesson in that this is where you want the learners, or where the learners take what they know, and when they're presented with new facts or new anything, and hopefully gain some transitional learning and make new insights. The next phase is exiting and objectifying the experience. The reader analyzes the envisionment and objectifies their understanding and reading experience. And I could see this being done in the last lesson of the storyline, where the learners were given the opportunity to evaluate it. It was from that evaluation I gained a lot of my answers that I've used to write this paper. But it's also a good opportunity for the learners to see what they've learned. And then exiting envisionment and moving on. And in this phase, the reader uses the envisionment to create a new one. So you take everything, or the learner takes everything that they've learned, and they make something new out of it. So if you've done the storyline about a marketplace, you could build your own market, as was in this case what they did. the teacher gave them the opportunity to take one or a few of the market stands and make it a reality. So they could make their own real market stand outside of the text or the storyline in this case. And I'm going to talk a bit about the dramaturgy and how that can affect the storyline. And the main parts of the dramaturgy is the theme or the plot, or the theme or the topic. It's the time, place, and environment. And it's also, of course, the plot or the story. And first up is the theme. And the theme in this storyline could be seen as either the marketplace or sustainability. And it created the context, and the learners really liked it. And one said that in this storyline, it affects our future. The story makes me care about the subject. So, it shows that it's important for the learners, that it's something relatable, something that they care about. And then it's the time, place, and environment. And in this storyline, the time was now. They never talked about setting it somewhere else, so it was just assumed. And the market stands took the role of the place. But the environment, the pupils felt it was lacking in this one. And one said that I missed building a market, like when we did the mall, where we put our shops and where we put our shops together and made a mall. Now you can put your stand anywhere. You could say that I miss building a foundation of sorts, a road through the middle where you could put your stand next to some bushes and trees and stuff like that. So yet again, in this one, there was too big of a hole for some of the pupils to fill. And they couldn't make enough inferences for it to be completely filled. So, and then there's the plot. And the theory and the practice should be close-knit. They need to be related to each other. You couldn't make a storyline about, say, dinosaurs, and then want the pupils to learn about, I don't know, space. And then you need to remember that what a story is like, that it has a start, it has a middle, it has an end, it has a problem or a dilemma that needs to be solved, and it needs to have a good ending. And the plot in this one, or the events that I saw, weren't that many. I could see 3 events. The letter from Sture, and the letter from the new potential stand, and you could also say that the presentations were an event in and of themselves. And the pupils wanted more events, and one event that was missing, that was those planned to be done, was where the learners were supposed to create their own events and imagine what could happen in a marketplace. And that was unfortunately cancelled due to sickness, but I think it would have added a lot to the storyline, because then you could use the pupils' own thoughts. And my conclusion, you should give the story a central role. You should keep it in mind. And you should keep the red thread alive through frequent events. And when the pupils are given a task, tie it into the story. You don't have to do much, just a small letter that says something from someone related to the story or something like that. And you need to keep the dramaturgical curve in mind. So it's not just key question, key question, key question. You want a good start, climax, and an end. And how could you do that? As I said, start, problem, climax, end. Anchor it in time so they know when they are, where they are, and create the environment, make the holes easier to fill for the pupils. Let the learners come up with possible events. They're creative, they're smart. Use that. And tie the key questions to the story so it's relatable. Vary the work methods. Use role play. Make movies. Play. Keep the motivation up. And keep the theme relevant and interesting. It needs to be close to the pupil or they will lose interest. And include tasks that add to the story. That's the one I just talked about. And when you're in action, in lessons, listen to where they want the story to go. As Torbjörn said earlier today, he talked about the agency and the meaningful choices. And if you let them decide, it will make it a meaningful choice. And it will add to the story. And you should dress up, as Margareta was saying, and it was yesterday, that you're a role model. And if you live into the story, they will too. And tie the tasks in. Even if you haven't done it when planning, you could just try to make something up on the spot and make it relevant. And yeah, that's it. Thanks.